Good morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host, Richard Charpentier, and today we'll be answering questions that were sent to BAKERpedia, and we have 10 minutes to do that. That's a format. So thank you for sending all of your questions. So first question received, what combination of acids can I use in French macaroons to extend the shelf life of refrigerated macaroons? So right here, I do not have the details of whether or not it's a, I'm assuming it's not just a dough, but it's a finished macaroon. So similarly to a cake product, when you're trying to extend the shelf life of a cake, it's going to be due to what pH of your finished products do you have in refrigeration, and sort of what is the length of shelf life you're looking in refrigeration. Because refrigeration is different than ambient. Refrigeration accelerates sort of a staling. And if you think of a macaroon, French macaroon, they're made with egg white and almond and sugar. So you have to understand that some of the acids, if you were to put sodium propionate or a propionic acid or maybe a lactic acid or anything of that sort to try to lower your pH, you will also impact a flavor. And also as your pH changes, you will also affect the way you structure and maybe the chew. So in terms of what combination of acids or what can you use, I would say it's going to take some trial and error to figure out what's the best acids for preservation of your system. And if you want to, I would be more than happy to, if you go to BAKERpedia on the bakery resources, you will see a consultant. You can get a 30-minute to an hour session, and we can break it down to understand more of the details. What's the formulation of your dough? Because in order for me to pinpoint what you need, I would need to understand what's your formulation, what's your process, what are the risks, with your product, how clean of a product do you get in order to extend. So extending the shelf life for all of you listening, it's never, oh, we're going to throw one thing in and walk away and it's done. It's many, many, many factors involved, starting with the bakery, starting with the sanitation program, starting with the type of packaging, transportation, etc., etc. But that's a good question. I love French macaroons. They're the best. And by the way, French macaroons also are they have a layer in the center. They have the filling, and then they have the shells. And then there's the interaction and the water activity of those two, which it's complex. But thank you for your question. Next question. We have someone asking L-Cysteine level for pizza dough using double O flour. Double O flour is a flour from Italy. It's referred to sort of a stronger protein used for pizza dough that a lot of people like because of the strength and the chew you're getting. And L-Cysteine is regulated by the CFR Title 21. So there's an upper limit which you cannot exceed when you're using L-Cysteine, for those who didn't know. And if you want to refresh your memory, there is a lot of good information that Dr. Lin put on BAKERpedia on oxidizing and reducing agent. So L-Cysteine is considered a reducing agent because it helps relax the dough. So your limit is 90 part per million. What is 90 part per million is basically 0.009 grams per every 100 kilograms of flour. So that's your 90 ppm. You do not want to exceed it. So knowing the level, I don't know your process. Usually what I've worked with L-Cysteine, I will range it based on the type of process I'm using. So if it's a higher speed and then you want the dough to relax faster, are you giving floor time to your dough, or you're allowing for the dough so not knowing your process, it's difficult to say, but you know that 90 parts per million ppm is your upper limit you have to follow in terms of federal regulation. Do not exceed it, because you're going to create other problems, but I would start there, start maybe with an upper amount and then back it down. All right, so but good question. Next question. Sunflower oil to manufacture ice cream wafers, and would like to replace my coconut oil and use sunflower oil. So very, very good question. How do you approach it? So from an R&D standpoint, if you come and you're asking me the question, I would say, okay, what are you replacing? You're taking a coconut oil, but compare one. They're both fats, right? And let's compare one. What's the melt point of coconut oil versus sunflower oil? So coconut oil will melt at 77 Fahrenheit, and sunflower oil will melt at 1 degree Fahrenheit. So your melt point is very different. And then the next thing, you will look at your saturation, saturated fat. Coconut oil is saturated at 92%, while sunflower is saturated at 11%. So you're not dealing with the same ingredients, even though they're both fat. Is as if you're going to take a Granny Smith apple with a Gala. They're different. They have different consistency. It's like a russet with another type of potatoes. They don't behave the same way. Their compositions are different. They're both fat. So as you go through, that's what R&D comes into place. You will have to do the proper validation, testing, and validate your shelf life over time. You might have to modify. It sounds good to change, but remember, any changes will create a cause and effect on your product, and it's what R&D we do. We understand. We put some testing protocols, and we test and validate before we change. Because if you change without doing and you get one good result, so this is perfect, I'm changing it. What's the end result long term? So always check. It might work. I've never replaced sunflower with coconut oil, but remember, they're different. They have different melt point and different saturated fats. So that will contribute to different functionalities with your ice cream wafer. I love the question. Thank you. Now for our last question, is CMC good to get a bigger crust in gluten-free pizza? CMC is carbamethylcellulose. It has binding properties. It's similar to gums and hydrocolloids. So it's being used a lot now in gluten-free pizza to give you the texture, because gluten-free, without the gluten, you need something to sort of bind it and give you the texture. So CMC will improve the size of your pizza crust, definitely. And remember, there are lots of different manufacturers selling CMC, and there are some modified CMC. So shop around, see what's available, what works best for your application. But CMC not only improves your overall volume, it will improve freshness of your product, especially in gluten-free, by stabilization of the water. It would water retention. It will delay retrogradation of amylose, of the starches components in there, so it increases your shelf life, and it also increases the plasticity and elasticity of gluten-free pizza crust. So overall, it's a great ingredient. And again, R&D standpoint, you're gonna have to test, you're gonna have to validate, you're gonna have to. There's no, even if there's a recommended usage level from a manufacturer, it's recommended in a lab. So once you use it in your application, what kind of machineries, what kind of floor time, what kind of other ingredients you're putting in, and how you're processing it will determine what's the proper optimum level of CMC you need. But yet, CMC will be a great ally for your gluten-free to get more volume. All right, so that's a wrap, my friend. So I wish you a great Tuesday, happy baking, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.